Hello everyone, welcome to the bigger question. Designing basic online and virtual data correction, education research in the context of COVID-19 is a thematic area that I would like us to discuss and be able to see as researchers, as young researchers, how prepared are we or how are we moving on in terms of collecting the data since 15th March of the year 2020 to the current year in the context of COVID-19. In March 15th, the year 2020, schools and colleges countrywide were closed in response to the COVID-19. Since when the COVID-19 virus case was confirmed and reported in Kenya, the statistics have been as shown in the graph, indicating uncertainty, indicating at times hope that will come to the end of this particular pandemic. But with our country, Kenya, being hit by the third wave, this tells us the COVID is still here with us. And therefore, as a researcher, we need to think on how best then we can be in a position to move on in matter to do with education research in the context of the COVID-19. March 15, the year 2020, the schools from kindergarten, primary schools, secondary schools, tertiary institutions, colleges, and even our universities were closed down. Since then, the accessibility to schools was restricted in line with the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of the Health directives. Guidelines on health and safety protocols for reopening of the basic educations and high institutions amid of COVID-19 pandemic were developed, and the school managers instructed to strictly adhere to the guidelines. Indeed, there shall be no visitors to the institution except authorized. Then the bigger question then comes in, how then? Have we been able to correct our data? How then? Are we planning to continue correcting our data in the schools since the March 15th? This brings in to the major challenge that as the researchers we have continued facing. One, accessing the target study units. Our study units have been schools, and these are the schools that are under the guidelines on health and safety protocols, and therefore accessing these study units has not been that easy. And indeed, it is not easy. Accessing our target population, the teachers and the learners within our schools, equally, it's not possible. Seeking authority in admin of the adherence to the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health directives, again, has not been easy. Even with the research permit, you still seek authority to access your target study unit. If they are schools, you need authority to access your target population, the teachers and the students. And the major fourth challenge is also assurance of the health safety to our respondents. How sure will the respondents trust us if we have to conduct face-to-face interviews? How sure are we the respondents have confidence in exchanging our questionnaires? But then we're saying, in the midst of these particular challenges, schools in Kenya, during the COVID-19 since March, the Ministry of Education and other agencies encouraged the learning institutions to embrace learning, including the community-based learning. Some schools undertook the online teaching and learning. Other schools adapted and even adopted technology-mediated learning through the use of the televisions, radio, education technology apps, and other mobile phone apps. This brings in the opportunity that we can be able to foresee. That in the context of the school trying to find their ways of being relevant and actually to embrace teaching and learning, there have been a rise in the use of the digital devices and technology within our schools. And therefore infrastructures in terms of the computer, digital devices, in particular the smartphones, and the internet connectivity has been on rise. Literature reviews shows that positive perception in the use of the virtual and online interaction within the schools has also gone high. And the awareness in the use of the various online teaching and learning platform has also been embraced in some of the schools. And therefore this shows us the preparedness in which our respondents and our target units are in matter to do with online and virtual learning. And therefore this brings us to the big question. How can the postgraduate students or even the young researchers exploit the opportunities and build on their strength in ICT so that they may be able to correct the data in the midst of the COVID-19? So the question of how do I go about collecting the data will solve it. Let us not imagine to sneak into our schools. Let us not imagine in having measures or rather strategies of collecting the data that is not ethically and legally accepted. Let us embrace the 21st century modes of online data collection. But for us to be able to do that, then there's a need for us to visit the do's and the don'ts for the online data collection. Once that is done, we'll be able to see how best we can be able to design and administer an online questionnaire. So stay tuned as we plan to have this basic training.